Ohio State number 2, Clemson number 3, and Oklahoma number 4. Here's why. The committee holds LSU and Ohio State in the highest regard. We've flipped them between 1 and 2 3 times this season. That's what happens when you work off of a clean sheet of paper with two teams that are so closely matched. LSU's dominating performance against an excellent Georgia team was a final piece of information that influenced the committee's vote. LSU's wins were against Georgia, Florida, Auburn, and Alabama, ranked 5, 9, 12, and 13. The committee favorably compared that to Ohio State's wins against Wisconsin twice, Penn State, Michigan, and Cincinnati, ranked 8, 10, 14, and 21. Clemson continued its powerful performance against everyone it played. It is true that they do not have the same strength of schedule as some other schools, but the committee believes they are so strong and so dominant that they are the number 3 team in the nation. Oklahoma is 3-0 against top 25 teams and 2-0 against the top 10. They helped themselves with their overtime victory against a good Baylor team, and obviously were helped by Georgia's loss to LSU. It is worth noting that each of the top 4 teams is also a conference champion. The highest-ranked Group of 5 champion this year is number 17, Memphis. As for the New Year's Six Bowls, here is who's playing. Number 5, Georgia will play number 7, Baylor in the Sugar Bowl. Number 6, Oregon will play number 8, Wisconsin in the Rose Bowl. And number 9, Florida will play number 24, Virginia in the Orange Bowl. Number 10, Penn State will play number 17, Memphis, the highest-ranked Group of 5 champion, in the Cotton Bowl. This is my final year on the committee, and if you'll allow me, this has been a privilege. Each of us on the committee serve because we want to put something back into the game we love. It's a lot of work, a lot. But that's the way it should be, and I'm grateful to the members of the committee, impressed by their commitment and dedication. Our job is to get it right. We work hard every week to do just that. I believe we've done so again this year. Frank Beamer, Chris Howard, and I will graduate from the committee this year. None of us will miss the travel, but we will miss the committee. It's been an honor serving. Thank you for you as well for what you do as journalists who also love the game. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Rob. We will now open the floor up for questions. Please raise your hand and we will get a microphone to you so that our friends joining by phone can hear the questions. And for those of you media members that are joining by phone, if you would like to ask a question, please press *1 on your telephone keypad. If you're on speakerphone, please pick up the handset. We'd also ask that you begin each of your questions by stating your name and your affiliation. First question.
Heather Dinich, ESPN. I think I heard you tell Reese that you assigned committee members to state a case for each of those undefeated teams at number 1. Who stated the case for Ohio State and LSU, and what were the cases beyond top 25 wins?
Yeah, I don't want to disclose who we asked to do that because sometimes they were appointed. But we did want to make sure that somebody, presented, the resume for each of those. And, we went through it like we do every week. You're looking at the full resume, wins against ranked opponents, how they're performing. And with those, because they are such good teams, we were getting into each phases of the game. The difference in the end was, for the 1 and 2 was the games against ranked opponents, and not only against the ranked opponents, but where they were ranked. LSU's dominant performance against what was the number 4 team ended up being the number 5 team. And their defense has really improved the last couple of weeks, and obviously the excellent play of Joe Burrow.
Hi, Rob. Jason Kersey with The Athletic. You said on the television broadcast that Georgia and the Georgia-Oklahoma thing was a discussion. First of all, what was the case for Georgia with 2 losses and a non-conference champion, and also how intense were those discussions?
I wouldn't call them intense. We wanted to be thorough. It was more on focus on being thorough. But the case for Georgia is, their wins against ranked opponents and the strength of their defense, similar to it's been all year. I mean, they've got 3 real quality wins.
Rob, Ryan Aber from the Oklahomans. Sort of along those lines, how would you characterize the discussion for the top 4? I know obviously 1 and 2 were difficult, but as far as the top 4, was it easier this year than it's been in the years that you've been on the committee?
I would never classify it as easier. Last year there were 3 teams and we had a long debate with varied resumes for number 4. So we didn't have that element this year. I think you've seen our rankings and heard us discuss throughout the whole process. We got 3 undefeated conference champions at 1, 2, and 3 who've performed at a consistently high level. So that piece has been there. So each year is unique, and yes, at the end we didn't have that, that intense debate with 3 teams for 1 spot.
So could we pause for just a moment? We're having some technical difficulties with our conference call line.
No worries.
Okay, I'd like to test our system now. This is Brett Daniels with the College Football Playoff. We're testing to make sure the conference call line is open. Let me check here just a second with our operator. Rob, do you want to step down for a moment? Water.
Chuck, would you go step up here, please? Just so we have somebody to talk to.
Testing the line again. And can the operator hear me at this point? Let me just. Okay. They're not acknowledging that they can hear me. I'm communicating with Dorothy. This is another test, testing the phone line. Can the operator hear the podium? I'm sorry? I am. I have been, and I'm communicating with her here by laptop, and she's not responding.
Jim? I have the main feed line and your line in the same conference. When I'm responding to the main feed line, when they talk to me, they can't hear me.
Okay, we'll try this again here. For those of you joining by phone, we are joined on the stage by Rob Mullins. We are taking questions now from the floor. Shortly, we will be taking calls. We're taking questions from callers. If you're interested in asking Rob a question, please press *1 on your telephone keypad. And if you're on speakerphone, please pick up the handset. Thank you. Now we will open the floor to questions here. Have one.
All right. Hi, Rob. John Hoover, the franchise in Oklahoma City and Tulsa. Yeah, I almost forgot my question. So when you look at, I know each season is its own season. Each team is its own team. But when you look at, in terms of Oklahoma, they made the playoff the last couple of years with a defense that was not ranked very high. I think last year 114th in the country. This year you look at them, they're 24th, so a jump of 90 spots in the NCAA rankings. I'm just curious, how does the committee discuss that? Can you illustrate it for us, how Oklahoma's defense is discussed?
Sure. I mean, again, we watch the games, and we get a lot of data as well. So we're looking at full resumes, results against all opponents. And then we see a lot of numbers too. So not only do we watch the games and see how they're performing, but we can evaluate the data as well. And when we're evaluating them against other teams, we put those up to 4 resumes on the board at the same time, which is a great tool to be able to spark discussion and, you know, point to certain things, whether it be on the schedule with results or within the data.
Max Olson from The Athletic. I just wanted to ask if you could kind of expand on the separation between Penn State and Wisconsin and kind of how you size that up after the Big Ten title game.
Yeah, obviously, you know, Penn State won their division. You know, 2 really good teams. You know, both have quality wins against ranked opponents. So, you know, as you've seen, when Wisconsin had the big win, they jumped over, and I think we felt that, you know, with the way they performed in the Big Ten Conference Championship, they deserve to stay ahead.
Okay, our next question will come from Nathan Baird with the Cleveland.com.
The earlier call, so I'm not sure how much you were asked already about Ohio State versus LSU, but I guess did something about Ohio State's resume in your mind change just based on the first half of the Big Ten championship game, or how much of a factor was that and how things shook out?
Well, we've been asked about it a lot. I think in the end, these are 2 teams that have been really close the entire time. And, as we've explained, it's, every weekend, one of them has done something to move above the other. I think last night in watching the championship game, LSU's performance against a number 4 ranked Georgia propelled the committee to put them just ahead of Ohio State in 1 versus 2. So did last night's games play a role? Sure they did. Every game plays a role. And I think it was more about LSU's strong, dominant performance over a number 4 ranked team that elevated them to number 1.
All right, next we'll hear from Jesse Temple with The Athletic.
I think you touched on this a bit already, but in the case of Wisconsin, how much did the committee factor in the way they lost to Ohio State in the Big Ten championship, the way they had a lead and kept it close when you got to the Rose Bowl argument, as opposed to the fact that they had lost 3 games in total this season?
Well, I think what really carried today is they've got 3 wins against top 25 teams. They number 14 Michigan, number 16 Iowa, and number 18 Minnesota. So and then there's lots of common opponents because in the same league. So I think that's what really carried today. Obviously, the way that they played last night, particularly in the first half, was something that was noticed by the committee. But in the end, their 3 wins against CFP top 25 teams really impressed the committee.
Okay, next, Ari Wasserman from The Athletic.
Hey, Rob, at the end of the year, you guys have all the resumes in totality, and you can stack them up against each other one by one. X many wins against top 25 opponents and all that stuff. But I was wondering, when you look at a schedule and how it lays out, do you guys weigh in any way if a team has to play top 15 opponents in consecutive weeks or 3 weeks in a row, and how does that factor into a resume? Is it just here's how many wins they have against top 25 opponents, or does the fact that a team wins those games consecutively under probably pretty tough circumstances like that impacts the way you view them?
Again, when we put those resumes on the board, we see the games in sequential order. So, and we see what the rankings are. So we recognize that, and that's a piece of it, but so is the entire resume.
But is there a distinction between a team beats the 14th, 12th, 16th teams on their resume, and if they beat them all in a row, does it carry more weight? You see what I'm saying, or is it just what it is at the end?
Well, it probably depends. When you're comparing against a team that beat number 5, number 9, number 12, and number 13, that's all part of the conversation. Sure, the sequence is discussed and who they beat is discussed, but so is another team's resume who's beaten highly ranked teams as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, our next question will come from Tyler Palmater from the Norman Transcript.
Hey, Rob, I was just curious. I saw that you said that there was not a very intense debate between Georgia and Oklahoma there after the games were played last night. Do you kind of characterize that sort of debate that you would have as sort of just doing your due diligence? I mean, is that how thorough the process is, or was there an actual sort of a back and forth there about which team could get in?
There was some back and forth, but I think it's fair to say that it was part of the due diligence, making sure that we were thorough and that we had it right.
Thanks, Rob.
All right, are there any other questions from the room here? Heather?
Without violating the sanctity of the discussions, can you talk about, I guess, paint the picture of watching the Big Ten championship game together, the value in being with the other committee members, and what can you say about what you guys were talking about when Ohio State's down 21-7 in the first half? Is there any sort of reaction that you can share from within the room about as that game unfolded and the discussions that contributed to the decision?
Sure, we don't really have the deliberations while the game's going on, but we're watching it just like you would watch it. We're oohing and ahhing at big plays. We're talking, about the strategy that's being employed and about certain players and how they're playing. But we save the debate until the results because things change and adjustments are made at halftime. And, our job is to look at results. But, we're watching it just like you would watch it, oohing and on, like I said, at big plays and seeing how it unfolds.
Hi, Rob. Newey Scruggs, NBC5 Dallas. What would you say to Pac-12 football fans? It's another year, and they're not able to have a team in there. What does the Pac-12 need to do to get back into the college football playoff?
Yeah, again, we don't evaluate things by conferences. When you got number 6 Oregon and number 11 Utah, who were in the top 10 for several weeks, and so the Pac-12 was a part of that discussion. Just so happens that this year it didn't work out.
I think we have a couple more here on the floor. Again, for anyone calling in, if you need to ask a question or would like to ask a question, please press *1 on your telephone keypad from here in the room.
Chuck Carlton, Dallas Morning News. Rob, you were kind of in a unique situation because neither Jeff Long or Kirby Hocutt had a team that was being discussed as a top 10 team. I was just wondering, what was that like for you? I know you had to recuse yourself. And was that any kind of a distraction for you when you got back in the room and you saw what the verdict was and things like that?
No, this is my 4th year on the committee. I had seen Gene Smith, Joe Castiglione, Dan Radakovich, and how the process works for the recusals. Obviously, I'm a full believer in the process. Each of these members, as you know, checks their hat at the door. Integrity is the highest priority. We all want our teams to be in the conversation, and I stood outside and paced. And like everybody that's recused, you anxiously wait to get back in there, see what the results were, learn, what the debate was, and get ready to get back into it.
Our next question will come from the phone call. Rob Oler from the Columbus Dispatch.
Yeah, apologies. There were technical issues earlier. I think we missed 10 minutes maybe of this. But if you could just speak to what was the most compelling argument for moving LSU ahead of Ohio State?
I think the most compelling argument, these are two very close teams. As you've seen, I think in our 6 rankings, one's been number 1 3 times and the other's been number 1 3 times. So, as I mentioned earlier in the call, it's just a matter of one does something to move slightly ahead of the other. And this weekend, LSU beat a highly ranked, at the time, number 4 Georgia team in an impressive fashion in the SEC championship. That ended up being their 4th win against teams that are ranked in 13 or higher in the final CFP poll. Their defense has improved and shown a lot over the last 2 weeks as they've gotten healthy. And once again, their outstanding quarterback play was on display last night.
Thank you.
Yeah, Rob, because of the recusal, I'm not sure if you know or can answer this, but if Georgia was part of the discussion for the 4th spot, after Oregon's performance last night, was Oregon part of the discussion at all for that 4th spot?
Just by the sequence of where they fall, they were, but the reality was, I think the majority of the conversation was around Oklahoma and Georgia. And again, it was pretty clear that it was Oklahoma.
All right. Any other questions from the room here? Heather, you have one more? Yeah.
I know you guys get to bed really late. I was wondering what time you actually went to bed, and you guys think a lot about coming back to this. What lingering questions did you have heading into this morning that you knew you guys would have to get back into today?
What time did I go to bed personally? I went back and again, looked at the sheet, looked at the results, thought in my mind, what, as the chair, what are the things that we need to make sure that we put on the table to make sure that we've been thorough? And we do this every week, and make sure that we engage every member to make sure that everybody who went back that night and reviewed it had an opportunity to put anything on the table to discuss, 1 through 25. And when we came back, everybody agreed that we should spend considerable time on, 1 through 3 again. And then we wanted to visit the group of 5 again because of what that meant. Even though the rankings have been consistent, we want to do it one last time to make sure that we were confident and 100% certain that we got it right because of what was on the line. And that was consistent with what I felt we needed to make sure that we did. What time did I go to sleep? Yeah, I don't even know. I kind of drifted out with the papers in my hand.
I think we have time for one more question here from Chuck.
Yeah, Rob, with Penn State going to the Cotton Bowl, I was just curious what the debate was in the room and the difference between Penn State and Utah for that spot.
Yeah, I think, again, it comes down to the fact the committee was really impressed with Utah all year long, similar to some other teams who hadn't had a similar strength of schedule. And in the end here, when Utah had an opportunity to play against a ranked team, a team that was ranked lower than them, unfortunately they lost, which kind of was a separator for them. When you compare that to Penn State, who beat a number 14 Michigan, won at a number 16 Iowa, and had a quality non-conference win against a Pitt. That ended up being the separator for those two teams.
All right, thank you, Rob.
Thank you, guys.
This will conclude today's press conference. Just as a reminder, a transcript and an audio version of today's news conference will be available shortly on collegepressbox.com. Bill Hancock will remain here in the room for anyone who has any follow-up questions for Bill. Thank you for coming out today. We appreciate it.